Hi, and welcome to the Psych Health and Safety Podcast. My name's Jason Van Shee, and I'm one of the hosts of the show. The aim of the podcast is to rapidly increase the knowledge and application of psychological health and safety in workplaces worldwide. To help with this, we'll regularly have guests from around the world who are leading the way in this important area. Before I introduce our guest and topic for the day, allow me to introduce my co-host, Joelle Mitchell. How are you today, Joelle?
I'm doing all right, Jason. Bit of a shock going back into isolation today after so long smooth sailing, but way to go for the first day on the job, hey?
Yeah, so for those tuning in, we're actually recording this a few days in advance, and it is the 1st of February. Perth is in lockdown for the first time in about 9 months. It's very new to us, not new to the rest of the world, and hopefully you won't blame us, because in episode 1, we did talk about how we've been 9 months COVID community transmission free.
Yes, don't blame us.
So if you hear anything in the background, that's probably just my 3 kids screaming, loving the fact that they don't have to go back to school this week. And also, if you tune in on the video, you'll probably see some impressive medals sitting behind me. They're not mine, they're my son's, because I'm recording from his bedroom. But we make do with what we have. Okay, so look, I'd now like to introduce our guest for today. I first met this man through an introduction over LinkedIn. He was kind enough to invite me to Liverpool, where he gave me a guided tour of the town and showed me around his workplace too, which ordinarily for most people wouldn't be so exciting, but it was pretty interesting for me. He's been in the UK for a while, but if you ask him, he'll say he's an Aussie. He's a senior psychologist with the UK HSC. Welcome to the podcast, Peter Kelly.
Yeah, how are you? I am actually Australian, born and bred in Bankstown in Sydney. Went to Manly Boys High School, used to watch Manly Warringah, then lived up at Parramatta and changed my allegiance to watch Parramatta. Went on walkabout when I was 18 and haven't got home yet. So yeah.
Yeah, good Western Sydney boy like myself. I grew up in St Mary's, and I was kind of halfway between Penrith and Para. In the end, I went for Penrith in the NRL. So
I lived a lot on the coast, so I used to surf a bit, but it's too cold over here to surf. So I just watch surfing programs on YouTube now.
So you're much more used to lockdown than what we are, Pete. So tell us, how are you surviving?
Well, I'm in my office, which I've been in for 9 months. I've not been back into my physical office for 9 months. I think you've got to get out. You've got to walk. You've got to get some physical stuff going, and you've got to form connections with people. Really, the thing that is the issue for a lot of people like myself who live on their own is isolation and loneliness. When you're a massive E on a Myers-Briggs, then your extroversion level is going to be impacted by not being able to be the center of attention, is what you're probably going to say next, Jason. But actually, I do miss people, and I miss that connection. So I like doing these webinars, but it's nothing the same as actually, saying hello to someone. So when I'm out in the park, as long as you're socially distanced, you can say hello. So we, as you'll be aware, we've got some issues in the UK at the moment, and we're in lockdown. We had some even bigger issues before we went into lockdown, but it seems to be we're pretty away now on vaccinations in terms of the first dose. So we could carry on doing that, and hopefully that'll make a world of difference. Eventually, it will get back to some sort of norm. But will it be norm? This brings us to the next bit, which is a global pandemic, a global recession, and a tsunami of mental ill health. I think the third one, which is the one hopefully we'll be talking about today, is the real issue, is the emerging threat for the world of work. Will be how we sustain and keep people's mental health for the next 5 years, because there's going to be changes to the way they work and the way we do things, and we're going to have to really start investing and taking seriously people's health at work, their psychological health and their safety.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, we've been cooped up in the house for what, Joelle? Not even a day yet. We had our lockdown commence at 6 p.m. last night, and we've got 5 days apparently. So we'll fingers crossed. It is only 5 days here in Perth. We've been living the good life for too long.
We've been in this one 6 weeks, and we've got another 6 weeks ahead of us. The pubs won't even open then, so pubs will open 10 weeks, maybe, if you're lucky. Yeah, so not that the pub is a defining factor of beating the virus, but yeah, it's not great once this thing gets loose. Yeah, it's quite a soul destroying and life changing moment. But I live 150 meters from my park, which is in the city in Preston. And yesterday there were, several thousand people, I guess, over the course of the day, just walking, because that's all you really can do. Everyone was distanced, but it's still, it's that kind of element. Yeah.
Yeah.
I get lots of IPA delivered to my house. I don't know if that's necessarily a good intervention, but it kind of works for me.
I want to be encouraging at the moment, Pete, but you did say there is obviously an unseen pandemic that is likely to continue well beyond the COVID pandemic. But what are you doing at the moment? I know you're having a regular Zoom catch up with people.
Yeah. So when this all started back in March, a couple of the people that I had been in contact with, they essentially were freaking out. Like, well, what do we do? I'm not working. I don't know what to do. And I suddenly thought, well, actually, what people need is connection. What we all want is to be around people. So, and I decided to do the Zoom meetings between 2 and 3 every day, Monday to Friday, just as a place for people who are on my LinkedIn, just to come in, have a coffee with me, as I'm doing now, and talk about absolutely everything. And in part of that, we might be talking about mental health. But what you're doing really is giving people a space to be able to go and breathe a little bit and have that opportunity to talk through things. And it was fascinating. And when someone was saying, well, I'm a single person business, I've only worked with one organization, and I've done 50 interviews. And I said, well, great, take the 50 interviews and find out what really worked well, help to streamline what you're doing, in terms of seeing it as an opportunity. But yeah, so we're now in lockdown 3, and I made a commitment early on to carry this on until we're out of lockdowns. So I could be here for another year. But
I've enjoyed it, mate. You're having a coffee. I'm usually having a Shiraz because it's about 10 p.m. and I'm catching up.
Yeah, and for the listeners, he is in shorts, and it just winds me up because I'm sat obviously, and it's -1 here, and he sits there in his shorts and his rugby t-shirt.
To be fair, it is 38 degrees today, so
yeah, giving me hope, but just no opportunity to experience it.
I'll just remind you that you had the choice to live in the UK. You could have lived in sunny Australia, but
I know. But then again, I haven't stopped walking, have I?
No. Well, I think it's fantastic. If anyone wants to jump on Peter's 2 p.m. Zoom calls, then reach out to him. He's a very welcoming fella, as I found.
Zoom meeting's an open one as well, so it's at the top of my LinkedIn profile, permanently up there.
Yeah, it's a great initiative.
So
I like coffee.
So say all of us. Can you tell us a bit about your professional career?
Professional career. That's interesting, isn't it? So I started as a nurse, working in learning disabilities, and I just ended up working with a psychologist who on a specialist unit for children with mental health, severe enduring mental health issues. And he said, well, what do you think you should do here to help to change that behavior? And I went, you're asking me? And he went, yeah, well, how would you change it? And I've suddenly thought, here's an opportunity to look at behavior and look at human behavior, and because I'd spoken to it in a different kind of way. And we did some work with one of the people that we were working with, and it was mildly successful. And that kind of triggered off my interest in psychology. I'm profoundly dyslexic, so the usual background at school was always outside the class. I got caned in the days you could get caned. I think I got caned 6 times. So I didn't. Here's a funny thing. The careers advisor said, "Do you want to become a jockey, Pete?" And I went, "Oh, sir, I can't ride a horse." He said, "I have no idea what else to suggest here." So yeah, I didn't have the greatest of schooling experience. Thank you, Australia. But I actually did an access course, and then I went to university and I got interviewed by the professor, and he said, "Oh, my son's in Australia." We spoke about Australia for about 25 minutes, and then we spoke about my desire to be a psychologist for 5 minutes, and I got offered a place. So being Australian has always helped me out. And yeah, did a first degree, decided to be what everyone wants to be, which is clinical. I was doing clinical psychology, neuro, and as I was doing neuro, we had the issue with sheep dippers here in the UK, and they were wanting someone to look at the neuropsychological data. And that's how I effectively ended up with the Regulator on a 1-year contract 21 years later. But it's been good, because when I was doing clinical work, you were treating people, and I always felt, after you doing interviews with people, that work was a contributing factor, but we weren't really looking at work. We weren't going, how do you change work to improve people's mental health? So going to HSE gave me that opportunity to do that, to look at the organisational factors that maybe cause people to feel depression or anxiety or experiencing work-related stress. So it was a natural sort of thing that grew out of it. So when I was there, we were really panicking. Well, the government was panicking at the time, because there was 6 million days lost to work-related stress in 1998. And by 2000, that had risen to 9 million. So they decided to do a national initiative for it, which we'll talk about later. 9 million. Last year, the data came out in this last October, 17.8 million. I would probably give my right arm to go back to 9 million. And let's remember this: that's 1 week into the reporting of the pandemic. The data this October, I would suggest, would be higher. And we could not unreasonably see 1 million days, 1 million people off over the course of a year due to depression, anxiety, and stress. And it's a quick jump from 17.8 to nearly 20 million days lost. Now you might say, well, we could blame the pandemic, but here's the issue: those numbers were bigger before the pandemic. So let's not use the pandemic as an excuse. We have a fundamental problem in the world of work globally with how we manage people's pressure and their demands.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's obviously been a focus because of COVID, bringing everyone's focus to mental health and the impacts that it is having on people and is likely to have into the future. And people have a short memory. They forget just before the pandemic, it's not, that was our worst year ever. And they kind of forget that it has been bad and getting worse year on year. It's not just the pandemic.
Jason, we weren't even in proper recession.
Yeah.
We didn't have a global pandemic. The global influenza pandemic, we had the starting of it.
Yeah. So yeah, look, fingers crossed, like we can start to work as a series of professions within, I guess, workplaces to protect people's mental health and well-being. But it's a big challenge, and I think there's a lot of people that need to rise to that challenge.
Well, it's a seminal moment. It is the 50-year storm, is it not? When all of these three things have come together, what we know is a pandemic will produce mental ill health. What we know is recession will produce mental ill health. What we really haven't had before is both at the same time. So yeah. So for me, the legacy of what we're going through now is a generational impact on people's mental health. And that's why it's so fundamentally important to be doing prevention now, because I'm watching 3-year-old, 4-year-old kids running behind their parents because adults are not wearing masks. What are we creating in 10 years when they become young adults and they go into the world of we've got to address mental ill health and mental health and the promotion of mental health through schools, through colleges, through universities, and through the world of work. So. Sorry about that ding.
That's all right. No, we're Joel and I are working from home today too. So if you hear any background noises, obviously there's a lot going on here as well.
All right. So Peter, so you've been with the HSE for how long?
1998 stuff. 23 years.
Wow.
What kept you there for that long?
What kept me there for that long? That's a really good question. The extension of my 1-year contract. Probably no. Well, the first 2 years were very interesting because I was dealing with a subject matter that I was enjoying, which was looking at neurological and neuropsychological injury. So there was a thing at the time called Swedish painter syndrome, where people are exposed to organic solvents and it was causing memory loss, or alleged memory loss anyway. And so I had initial interest, but then when the government came in 1990 and decided that they wanted to do something on work-related stress, there's a group of us. It was just there was 3 psychologists and a very small team, and then we basically we're tasked to develop a national strategy for how to tackle it. And so 20 years later, first 10 years, I think I was rowing in the wrong direction. People just thought you're a bit of a maverick because you're talking about, let's do organizational things when it's all about individual. 1990s, teaching people to cope. I think I've shared with Jason, when we were first asked about this, we were in a hotel bar in Cardiff. We'd just been at a conference, and we actually wrote the outline of the management standards on 3 beer mats. Over the course of 2 bottles of wine between the 3 of us, but that was it started out in a hotel bar, but then in the end, over the next 4 years, we developed into a national process, in which we launched in 2004. But yeah, I just found something that just ticked my box, and something that really brought in together my experiences from being clinical, where actually prevention just seems the obvious thing to do, and we set out on a journey to reduce work-related stress. 2004, we were at 12.5 million days lost to work-related stress. So, we carried on doing it, and what's been fascinating, which is the last 10 years, the amount of work that's come around from people, the amount of studies that have been done, and the last 5 years have been even more interesting, but frustrating as well, because there's been an over concentration on the individual and not on the organization. So I feel like, like a rotating message that goes around in your head, do the organizational bit, But yeah, I still get up every morning and enjoy my job. I would like to think at 53, because I've got to work till 67, that I don't have to be doing this and somebody else is talking to me about what they're doing, because it's fundamentally something that we can tackle if we choose to tackle it. Asbestos and mesothelioma and respiratory disorders were difficult tasks, but we still tackled them, and I think we have to tackle work-related stress. 57% of all sickness absence in the UK is stress, depression, and anxiety amongst the working population, and that's with the 17.8 million.
So is that the intent of the management standards, is to sort of start addressing the occupational influence in that?
The intention of the management standards was to say, it was to basically give people a process that they could follow to have a look at how they manage their sources of stress in work. And we did it from the principle of primary, secondary, and tertiary intervention. So primary being organisation, tertiary is the bit that you do to treat people I would argue even mindfulness and resilience is a tertiary intervention. And the secondary bit is, the promotion and the training of managers and individuals and teams about how they manage people. Now, the really interesting bit, if you look at it, is if you look at the promotion of mental health, And we really fundamentally wanted to make a difference. If we were doing secondary that actually focused on the organisation, the individual, and the teams as a cross spectrum, I think we're beginning on that journey, which is that we want to look at creating workplaces that incubate health, not ill health, that actually promote health. So when you're in work can be seen as almost part of that public health agenda to keep people happy and to keep them sustained in work. There is no good teaching someone to be resilient and mindful and then putting them back into a toxic organisation, because both of those skills are not going to sustain you. You're going to find you're going to have to tackle that. So that's what the management standard is set out to do. Is set out to put a structure around it, and we've been going now 17 years, but we're still having to take it back out to people because people have got, I didn't know about them. So we've constantly developed and constantly looking at, we have the existing standards based on the evidence base. We have talking toolkits, we have videos. You can go onto our website. There's some videos on stress, and it's something that I've done the voiceover for. There's one that I look like a ghost where I did a video with one of the officers. RIT guys, why can't they make you look slightly like you're human? But there you go. So we constantly look at different ways. We've now got an electronic version of the analysis tool available. We just finished off doing an app of all the relevant legislation for SMEs. So yeah, we've moved with the times. What I think businesses haven't done is moved with the risk, which is to say, here it is. It is the issue. We need to do. As soon as you start tackling it, you begin to see an impact. And people go, I didn't realise it would be that easy. And I'm like, well, people often know what the problems are. They just want you to listen, so you can get the answers. It doesn't always cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars. Sometimes the simple changes in those workplace practices will help.
So what would you say are some common psychosocial hazards that you've found sort of across industry?
So pre-pandemic, if you think about the Karasek model, demands, control, and support, we know that these are being characteristically part of most people's experience: high demands, low control, and low support. And we've seen that in multiple sectors and multiple organizations. Combine that with relationship issues or a lack of role clarity and change, then you've got the 6 areas of the management standards. In terms of the research perspective, Karasek's model obviously is there, and we have work done on the psychological contract, which is about what we perceive our employer should be doing for us when we go to work. And I think that's also important. And Bakker and Demaruti in 2008 did a paper called the Job Demands Resources Model, and I think that's the natural move on. So where actually the kind of resources we have determine the outputs and of how well we manage the stress that's in our workplace, and it doesn't supplement Karasek's model, but it kind of like nicely aligns with it. And I think so. The evidence is there that workplaces can be a source of stress, but also there is emerging evidence that managing work like stress and mental health can actually improve people's perception of work. It's interesting that if you look at the Times 500 top 500 companies to work for, top 100 companies in that list year on year, at the heart of what they've got is well-being and health programs. Pretty simple, isn't it? Look after the people, they'll look after you. And businesses that go bust and break down tend to be ones that don't look after their people.
Yeah, it's a good observation. I'm just thinking about that, the job demands resources model. Do you think that job demands on individuals has been increasing over time?
Oh yeah, biblically. I mean, I think we've as an inspector, I go into factories because I'm a warranted inspector, and And I'll just give you an illustration. I went into a factory that makes biscuits, and there's a machine that comes along with the cooked biscuits, and then the operators have to pick up the biscuits, put them into a plastic container. So gillet is the technical term. So it has 3 separate holes, and you put 4 biscuits in. So 12 biscuits, very nice. There are 8 people that work on that system, and for job rotation they move down 1. So remember this: the first person 1, 2, and 3 will be on that for the bulk of their shift. And I said, how many times is the operator picking up a biscuit, these 4 biscuits, and then putting them into this plastic container? And they said, oh, we don't know. And so I did a 10-minute video, and then I extrapolated it on the basis of the average from that. Now, in that instance, the person at number 1 and 2 was doing 17,000 repetitive movements a day. Now, when you go back to them and say 17,000 repetitive movements a day is going to cause problems to your musculoskeletal frame and disorder, but it's also going to challenge your fatigue and produce strain because of high demands. They were like, yeah, but the system, that's the way the system is. And I said, but the system can be slowed down by 5, 0.5 of a second. You would save, you would save time on the capacity on your people. And they said, yeah, but we'd lose 5% of the product. And I said, but you're already losing 22% on sickness absence. And it was kind of the association was, surely the system is better and the system's more effective. And I'm like, no, because the system's not been designed around the individual. So it's a very long way of getting around to where I wanted to say, but we design systems that don't interact with people, where most of us are working in front of computers now. And if you look at the way the original idea of a computer, it was based on the desktop metaphor, wasn't it? So you had places where you put information into files, they sat on your desk, you took them out, you had a recycling, a bin to put stuff in. Technology has changed so much now that that desktop metaphor is out. And actually, where do we interact with our machines? It's possible with my work's iPhone. I've got 3 phones. I can carry 10,000 files on that, and that weighs 1.2 kilo, 1.25 grams, but it carries 10,000 files, and that's equivalent to a small office of foolscap files, top to bottom. So these things that we've had, the technology that we've done, has brought in a lot of extra demand, and I don't think we've brought in the systems to manage them. So yeah, over the course of the last 10, 15 years, I've seen a huge increase in mental demands on people, and it's because we need to actually look at how we design things around the person.
So so we're seeing increased demands. We're seeing obviously worse outcomes in terms of workplace stress, depression, anxiety. What's the legal requirement here for organisations to have a healthy work environment so that people can come to work and not get ill?
Well, there are different countries have different legal enforcement powers, but I know Australia and ourselves and America and Canada and some of the Southeast Asian countries, there's a requirement to define where the risk is. So you need to do a risk assessment. So, for example, in the UK, there are two bits of legislation. There is the Health and Safety at Workers Act, Section 2, that requires you to protect your workers and members of the public from exposure to ill health, things that can make you ill or cause safety incidents. So that's the Health and Safety at Work Act, Section 2. And the management regs, which are 1999, put a requirement for you to do a risk assessment. And then, so that's Reg 3, and then Reg 5 requires that you act upon the findings of that, so that you've identified a risk and how you're going to manage that risk. So those legislation that exists are there already to do that. Now, different countries have similar legislation, which requires you to identify that risk and to do something about it. So they are legally binding, and you can choose to take an improvement notice against organizations, or I know that the principles, so for example, in America, they have total worker health. I know in Australia, you've altered your health and safety legislation to include standards around mental health. And one of the things we do over here is I train all of our new inspectors around psychosocial risk. I train them on what to look for if you're going to go for a look into an organisation where stress might be an issue. And then I've trained a cohort of senior inspectors to be to look at cases as they come in and determine if they meet our criteria. And then I would be involved in any action that we take, and work with the inspectors to determine, what we should do. So people are aware that it's there. They still look at you blankly when you say we've got a risk assessment for stress, but it's pretty straightforward. It's in the legislation, and that's what our expectation is, that you do something.
So what approaches do you do to achieve compliance then as a regulator?
Well, we remind people of their duty. So we remind them that the Act is fairly clear and the regs are clear what you need to do. We proactively do campaigns. We've done masses of promotion around how you have conversations and discussions with your employees. We have a waft of tools that you can get all free on our website, which help you to do that. We constantly work with the trade union movement to promote the management of mental health and stress in the workplace. We use the initiatives such as the Thriving at Work report, which came out from the UK, identifying 6 key aspects of what are needed to manage people's mental health at work. So we always have the big stick, as we call it. We could use the stick, but we've chosen for a very long time to use this carrot to say, encouraging people to come along. I think we're getting into a stage, though, where I think the regulations and the regulators across the globe are going to have to start being a much more proactive. And we've got capability to be proactive. We've got the existing legislation, we've got the structure. Because in some ways, if people don't see us being proactive on it, they're not going to take it as a serious issue. But here's the thing: you can issue a notice and be proactive, but you might only bring change in that organisation for a very short amount of time. The biggest difference is changing people's behaviours and people's attitudes towards it. And that's getting them to realise it's good for business, and it is. Yeah. Did you actually decide to work for Jason and then get made ill? No, it's not how this stuff works.
So it's only day one, Peter. So give it time. It's only day one, but
I'm just putting a red flag up straight away for you. No, but that is it. Hey, I'll take my job and I'll get ill. Oh, thank you. Yeah. It's not quite how you wouldn't put that in your promotion activity for a job, would you? Take this job and it'll make you ill. I think, and I just think we've got to look after our people. It's pretty straightforward stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, you'd think so, Peter. And we've been using the carrot approach here in Australia for many years as well. I mean, in 2014, PricewaterhouseCoopers published a report that demonstrated that for every $1 a company spent on health and wellbeing resilience kind of initiatives, there was a $2.30 return in mental productivity.
How much?
$2.30 for every $1 spent on kind of.
You guys are behind the times. 1 in 5 in the UK, Ernst and Young, which is So here's the interesting thing, Jason. The recent report says 1 in 7 to 9. So in this pandemic and in this situation, investment in health and well-being is actually showing as a rise.
Yeah, but
return on investment.
We've been using the carrot for a long, long time now. But in the last 20 years, you've seen the UK, for example, go from 6 million days lost due to workplace stress to almost 18 million last recording period. So would you say that the carrot is working?
No. I think you need both, but I've never swayed from my desire and my belief that actually some people just need an encouragement, and the regulations there and the legislation are that encouragement. I'd like to think that the last year has really reframed people's mind about the world of work and how the psychology of work is really important. And I'll be a perpetual pain for the next 13 years until I retire, reminding people that that actually the principles of things that we do in work are really important. And I would hope that we begin to actually tackle this issue. It is not going to go away from simply wishing people were stronger, which is why the numbers have gone up. When people talking that did the organizational bits, we went down. We went from 12 down to just shy of 9 million, 3 million in a year. When people started concentrating on the individual in resilience, mindfulness, everything, mental health, first aid, all of that, we've gone back up. So the association is that if you don't do the organizational bit, you get a rise in individuals over time. In saying that, we've just completely taken the human out of work and gone, we've got this system, we've got this process, and now we're reaping the price for that,
Yeah, so I know in Canada they've seen quite some great evidence for when you take a systematic approach to workplace mental health that you can see some really great benefits. We're going to be talking about that with Sapna Mahajan very shortly on the podcast. So hopefully she can give us firsthand her experience of that. But I just it's interesting to see these record levels of workplace stress, and companies, there's not more cases of companies where they have been served notice for not having a safe work environment.
Yeah, I do. I think people have not. People have attempted to draw down on doing the individual character. Not I say individual on basically doing the promotion angle. I mean, like when we ask people to do COVID-19 risk assessments over here, that's funny. That's my alarm. Wake me up.
Thanks for getting up early again today, Ben.
Yeah, cheers, mate. Yeah. What was I saying? How got me flow gone there?
Yeah, you were saying with the COVID risk assessments.
So with our COVID risk assessments, we've asked organisations to look at people's mental health and stress, because we recognise that you need to have that in there. We have capability to take the regulatory position on this, and we've put a criteria out, which is freely available. Organisations go and see on the terms and conditions of the cases that we'll take. We won't take individual cases because it's an organisational approach, and we need more than one case. So I think you'll see many of the regulators across the globe starting to engage in a much more proactive way in this. I talk to your inspectors in Australia and equivalents to me in the US and in Canada and amongst other countries. So we just have to do this. We're just going to keep growing. It has to be something. So this capability, I just think people have taken let's change people's hearts and minds.
Yeah, so obviously there is existing legislation in many countries, as you mentioned. One thing that isn't legislation though, but thing that's being developed over the last year or two is the ISO standard for psychological health and safety at work, and you've been involved in the development of that.
Yes, I have. It's been an interesting 2.5 years of my life, and it's been good, really. And it effectively, what it acknowledges is that an original standard 45,000 1 came out, which set out a system for the management of safety, management systems for safety. And there's an acknowledgement that psychosocial risks weren't necessarily covered in that standard. So 45,003 is an approach to respond to that. It's titled Psychological Health, Safety and Wellbeing at Work. So it's looking at these issues that we've discussed, but putting a structure around it to allow organizations to embed that into their own existing safety management systems. And it is based on a lot of negotiation and a lot of conversations with people, which helped us to get to the position where we released the last version was released in December of last year, and it's due for publication in June of this year. And it effectively takes you through that process of looking at stress and looking at mental health and putting a structure around it. It's voluntary, so it's not a defined standard. So defined standards mean you have to have acceptance across all regulatory bodies across the globe, which you can imagine is going to be complicated. But I think it's a good, useful start of getting people to realise you can tackle this. And it has in it primary, secondary, and tertiary. Although above it sits a hierarchy of control, and we've had many conversations about this, Jason. So if you look at hierarchy of control and elimination of risk as the first principle, we're not talking about the elimination of a job, which we're talking about the elimination of those elements of the job which we know are causing people to be ill. So if you tackle these eliminations at a primary level, you're going to be more effective in my skin's starting to, the sun's rising here, so if I suddenly look like an angel, it's because of the sun.
You've got to check for the video listeners so you can see Peter's angelic face.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the sun rising, isn't it? Yeah, so I think what it does is it formalizes that structure, which we've been looking for, and gives people an outline of what they need to do, which is really interesting. You see, Anthony Lamongenet, who's an academic in Australia, did a review in 2007 around interventions for psychological health, safety, and stress, and he concluded that primary interventions and secondary interventions was the most effective when they're together, and that tertiary interventions on their own don't show an effect, and that's kind of been really the principle around 45,003. You've got to do a whole organization approach.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll have Tony on the show shortly to talk about the integrated model of workplace mental health and that primary, secondary, tertiary. Yeah,
he's an American who's sort of adapted to Australia, but he's a very, very, very good academic, and I have a lot of respect for him. When I was home in Australia in January, we had a nice little chat. Couldn't catch up. We were going to try and have a beer in Melbourne, but didn't happen.
Yeah. So what is some of your hopes for ISO 45003 then on a global kind of work on mental health? I just hope that they start actually doing what's in there. Actually look at the principles of psychosocial risk management, and rather than saying it's too hard, think, well, actually we can start putting these things in place, that it becomes part of your normal safety management system, that we don't go, it's too hard, we go, oh, well, we're going to do something about it. I tire of that statement, it's too hard, because asbestos was really hard, but thousands were dying. Thousands would still have died. But here's the irony of this situation is people are dying. People will die from cardiovascular disease due to exposure to stress over long periods of time. We know that from the Whitehall 2 studies.
So why are we not focusing on making the work environment as healthy as possible? Sometimes the immediate effect is you go off with stress, but if you're the constant exposure to poorly managed psychosocial work environments is potentially cardiovascular disease 10, 15 years later.
Yeah, it's
Do you think that? Sorry.
Go on, Joey. No, go on, Joey. Yeah, it's all right. Jason just hogs these things.
I will get better at butting in as we get to know each other a bit better. I'm
and
sure.
for those of you on the podcast, Jolly has a really stunning picture behind, which is kind of like it's surrealism, but I just wanted to say it's nice. I've actually just had one commissioned similar to that. So sorry, I'm going off track, but it's yeah.
That's okay. I'd like to take credit for it, but I'm actually staying in temporary accommodation at the moment, so it's it just happens to be there, but it is nice. Thank you. Now you've distracted me and I have to remember what I was going to say. That's it. So to what extent, asbestos exposure is very clearly linked to work for the majority of the time. And yes, there's some, naturally occurring asbestos, but I think the links between work exposure and the diseases associated with asbestos are probably a lot clearer. Whereas I think the argument that lots of organisations will make is that, well, people are exposed to stress in their home lives, and that's not our responsibility to do anything about it.
Yeah, but the thing is that those same stresses that they have in their home come into work, and then they don't go, I'm not going to put a guarding on a machine because he's stressed out. And that, for me, that's a simple one as an inspector. Absolutely, everyone brings things into work, but you don't stop at the risk because someone's brought something in. And actually, you manage the risk by acknowledging the fact that some things at home might impact on work. It might mean that you're actually fatigued, or you're tired, or your mind is in another area. So you engage in a behaviour that leads to a safety incident, and you injure yourself or you injure others. We don't go, well, bugger, sorry, it's so strange. No, bugger. Here's something that happened, and we're just going to ignore it. Everything we do is impacted by everything else that's around us. It's just an excuse, and it's a tiring excuse. I've heard it for 20 years. And it doesn't actually make a job. It really doesn't matter where this is coming from. You have a duty in work to manage those risks, and including managing those risks is managing how your people are at work. If someone comes in and says, boss, I'm going through a divorce, you need to think about the implications of I'm going through a divorce. What does that mean for that person? How am I going to manage that workload? And if that means he shouldn't be on a machine on a lathe where he's drilling into metal rods because actually his concentration isn't going to be there, you move him off onto another job, don't you?
And how well do you think that concept is understood by employers?
I just think they get clouded by it's too hard. Then an inspector comes along and says, well, what else would you do? I mean, when I've said to them, when I said the issue here, you say it's home stuff. Well, if that's the principle, why then can all of these other risks just coexist? They don't, and I think we've given mental health and we've given stress this sense of it's untouchable, it's a soft issue, it's something that you can do. The management standards gave you five principles, which are the 5 principles of risk assessment, because with any health issue that's there, you can apply those principles to it. So I don't make any excuses for challenging people to go, it's absolutely too hard. But all of the conditions I mentioned to you were absolutely hard. Asbestos was hard. Respiratory disorders, hard. Cancers, hard. Workplace cancers, hard. But did we say it's too hard, we're not going to do? No, but when we went stress and mental health, a bit too hard. No, we're not going to do anything about it. And yet now we have we have a huge crisis in terms of the numbers globally, and you can do the research. These things are epical. in terms of we are in Australia has huge numbers, America, Canada, and I mentioned Southeast Asia, and South America. When we were in these interviews, when we were doing this webinar with 45,000 and three, and as we were developing that, we were hearing across the globe people having similar experience. So yeah.
And you'd have to think if one good thing could come out of this pandemic, hopefully people would go with the business interruptions and all the risk management that we've had to do around COVID. Maybe mental health isn't that hard. Maybe we can apply risk management to workplace stress.
Well, mental health is at the heart of people's response to this pandemic, isn't it? I think I've shared that slide with Jason, which is actually, we see an increase, wave one of this pandemic, we saw an increase in mental health, and it was gradual. Wave 2 and 3, as people go into these waves, we see very sharp increases, and we see very sharp increases coming out of it. And we're seeing increases in the middle of it. So yeah, it's, it is really shown up how systems and processes and work need to be adaptable to the human being and to the situation that we find ourselves in. Compliance with COVID-19 isn't just about putting a barrier up between you and your work colleague. It's about creating a work environment where people will actually engage in a safe way. And because if work is about one thing, it's about connection, and we connect with the people that we work with. And to get compliance, we need to connect in a safe way. So I think it's a really good opportunity for 45,000 free to come in and go, well, actually, these are the things you might want to consider.
So, Peter, given this looming mental health crisis that we're sort of already in, that it's going to get far worse before it gets better, do you have words of wisdom for practitioners who want to get involved in this and start working to improve the mental health of employees?
I start with honesty. Start with actually going to organisations and saying that we have to tackle this as an organisational issue. Make mental health a KPI for that organisation. Get the senior management to buy into the process of tackling mental health. Do things that just become this is just the way we do it around here. Do you know that normal expression that people have? And I think when we start saying, actually, the way we're going to do it is we are going to look at proactive ways of looking at people's mental health, and also what we're going to do when people are further down on that spectrum, who are off, then we begin to make a difference. It's so interesting. There's a theory by it's called Yerkes and Dobson's Law, 1907, right? Think of the date on that, 1907, in which they were talking about the fact that pressure motivates and demotivates people. And currently what we've got is excessive pressure. And that leads to people feeling work-related stress, depression, or anxiety. What we need is a degree of pressure that manages us and manages that situation. So in the context of work, we need to know what we're doing and how we're doing it, and that we've got the tools to do it. But I love the fact that Yerkes and Dobson thought in 1907 was saying the same things that we're saying now, which is actually too much pressure. It's no good for you. Not enough pressure is equally no good for you, but you get what they call the term rust out, burnout. So you just have to be proactive on it. I know workplaces that do this suddenly go, oh my God, that was good, wasn't it? Why are the top 100 companies in the Times list all successful? What is the characteristic that they all have? They put their people front and center of what they do, and they deliver a product, and they deliver it at pace and at speed, but they take their people with them. And I think, and they're successful, and they are multinationals and they're SMEs in those top 100. But because they get that people need to be looked after, and that if you create the right work environment, people will work incredibly creatively and hard, but at the same time feel that they have the freedom to manage those moments where you go up and down.
Comes back to that psychological contract, doesn't it?
Oh yeah. If you look after me, I'll look after you. And effort reward imbalance by Segrist, isn't it? What do you get from that in terms of the amount of effort and the reward that I get back? And what we need to remember is because people say, "God, Pete, this is really complicated," and I'm like, "Why is it complicated to talk to your colleagues when you talk to your family and your kids or your relatives? What is different? Well, what human trait do you detach from when you go into work and go, nah, I'm not going to engage? I don't think so. I don't think I'm going to do that. Because actually, we've already got the set of skills. You don't need to be a psychologist to do this. You just need to be a human being that is actually prepared to use the emotional connections that we've already got, the ability to communicate, listen, and spend time with people to help people to understand that you can manage this. And I know it sounds very woolly and typical psychologist, but the truth is we have got these skills. We just switch them off when we go to work, and I don't understand why. Because we can do it. And I've worked with people. I just did a project with the foundry sector on mental health, and these are a group of big lads who don't do mental health and don't talk about mental health. That was a statement when we started. But man, when you get these guys into a room, or you walk around the foundries with them and you start talking to them, they do looking after their family. And then if you say, well, look, guys, the people here that you're working with, they're an extension of your family. And actually, why not have that conversation? And it was interesting to see their attitudes change over the course of the training that we did. We did it over 12 months. And one of the guys who picked up a 40-kilo weight, which is used to it's a mold that you put the sand in to cast metal, and he just picked it over and put it on his shoulders, and he said, "Take a picture of this." So we took a picture of it because we were doing good housekeeping at the time, and he just turned around to me and he said, "I get where you're at." And I think that's good because we were just showing them you can do the same things you do at home as you can do in the workplace. Yeah. Not everyone wants a hug, though, do they, Jason?
Yeah, I found that out myself, I think, when we met in Liverpool. And no, thanks, Pete. I think that's a great way to probably wind up today's podcast episode. I think that's, we all have these interpersonal skills. We have families, we have loved ones. And if we treat our work colleagues the same way, that will go a long way to dealing with workplace mental health.
And mate, that's not about being soft. It's about being human. I'll go on about this until I'm dead, but we need humanity in work, and we need people to be people. And actually, at the heart of it, we can make a massive difference to those people around us. And I think that's really important. My boss texts me in the morning. He'll text me in about 15 minutes and say, get out of your bed, get out of your pit, because I know you're still asleep. But actually, I'm very lucky. I have a really good boss, and I get on very well with him. And actually, I probably would still be in bed. But the point is, it's that connection, that human element, that's really important. And I don't buy in, as you said. I'm not going to buy into this. We have to be something different. The successful companies in this field, in this area, are the ones that look after their people. Do you know there's a company over here, Timpson's? They do their shoe mat. They make shoe shines and fix shoes. Okay, they're subsidiaries. So the companies are, people buy into that process. When the pandemic hit in wave 1 over here, the company turned around and said, right, all the shops closed. We're going to cover all the cost of the loss to the salary through the furlough schemes and everything else, and then we're going to look after you. Now that, for me, is proactive management. Okay, and what does that buy? That buys commitment from people. That buys a sense that people that will do. And I know many companies during this pandemic that have just thrown themselves right at it, and I hope they can continue to do the same principles. So, which is throw themselves right at it.
Yeah, there's been some.
Thank you for letting me talk about the management standards, which we did eventually get to.
We did talk a little bit about the management standards today, but I think, you've been there since the very beginning. Like you said, you told us how it was created. Well, it started in a pub, and now it's something that is widely referenced worldwide. So credit to you and your team for putting that together, and all the work that you're still doing to try and make it relevant and communicate that to employers to help them be able to care for their workforce.
But this is our time, man. Honestly. This is, if ever there was a time of mental health and well-being, it's now. And we cannot continue just to push the individual. We've got to do the organization, and we've got to train people in a way that helps them. And one day, in the next 10 years, we'll sit in front of people, and we'll start to realize that we grabbed this by the horns, and we actually did something about it. Otherwise, I'm going to be a perpetual pain until I'm 67, because this is where I'm at. This is the thing. I cannot legitimately accept that you can go into work and be made ill by something that's preventable. I don't get it. And I won't get it, and I won't accept it as a norm, because it's too hard until we challenge that.
Well, your work and motivation is inspirational, mate. As you say, it's a seminal moment for the world of workplace mental health, and hopefully people listening are inspired to take action in their own workplaces. Look, but what we'll do is we'll wrap up the podcast there. Remember, we do videotape this episode, so if you want to see any of the video, go jump on YouTube. Peter did dress up for today, so it's worthwhile checking that out.
Yeah, I put a t-shirt on.
We will hopefully be cutting some clips from this and sharing that through the Flourish TX LinkedIn page, so make sure you follow that if you want to see those. And also feel free to connect with myself, Joelle, and Peter if you want to continue the conversation. We're all friendly and won't bite. We'll see you on LinkedIn, and we'll see you on next episode. Thanks again, Peter and Joelle.
Thank you.